To Extra Innings, I am Taylor Gattoni and Adam Jaksa for today's Extra Innings. You guys, welcome in again.
It's good to be back with you.
I know, I'm happy to have you here. Well, we are talking about the Lansing Lugnuts taking on the Kernels, and the Kernels, though, unfortunately took 4 out of the 6 in this past series. Can you recap some of the game highlights throughout the previous series?
Things got a little bit corny for us. We were looking at Cedar Rapids, they're the best team in the West, and we were wondering, how do they win? We found out they win in a couple of different ways, one of which they came back, they beat the Lugnuts in the 9th, and another of which turned historic.
Yeah, they had some close wins. We looked at their offensive numbers coming in. They didn't hit a lot of home runs. They're not one of the best teams hitting for average, but that all changed last week at hitter-friendly Jackson Field, and they won a couple close games. The Lansing Lugnuts won a couple of close games, but we won't forget the first day, Jesse, a guy that's been calling games for Lansing since 2009, steps away, and the next day, the Lansing Lugnuts give up a franchise record 24 runs on 20 hits. Pretty remarkable.
It's something, though, that you have to take a step back and say, well, there was a position player, Danny Batista Jr., a really swell person, who goes out there in the 9th inning just to eat up outs. They need 3 more outs, and along the way to 3 outs, 3 home runs.
3 home runs, 8 runs, 24 runs. 2 guys in the 9th inning came up. One guy twice, the other guy once had a chance for the cycle. 2 guys in 1 game.
That's too much. That's too much happening. I mean, you're looking at the score and you're like, oh man, we need to make a comeback, right?
Yeah, well, maybe not that night. It turns into a football score. However, and this has been a hallmark of this Lugnuts team all year, you have a loss like that, you immediately come back, and you have a great victory on Friday in a game that you attended.
You know what, me and Crystal went, and if you see, I'm wearing some merchandise right now. We got my new Lansing Lugnut shirt right here. I feel like it looks pretty good.
Yes.
And I mean, you have all of these other merchandise behind us. So me and Crystal had a good time. We saw the Friday night fireworks. We got some merchandise, and yeah, they won 3-2. Go Nuts.
Yeah, you went shopping.
We did a lot of shopping. Shopping's always a good thing, except not for the bank account. But it's fine. And speaking of promotions, like the Friday night fireworks, what are some of the promotions that were taking place over the past series? Because it was fun.
Well, Adam's mustache was in fine form. Because we held Lugnut PI nights.
Yeah, Magnum PI tribute to the great Tom Selleck TV show back in the 80s that, unfortunately, I have never seen, but some great pictures of him online.
Homework.
And Hawaiian shirts were given away, the Lansing Lugnut theme to the first 1,000. They rocked it. And then, of course, we had the great Avengers weekend with the Marvel-themed jersey that the Lugnuts wore.
I know there was Thor. I know Black Panther was doing a backflip above the dugouts.
Yes.
I could not do that. I think I'd break myself.
Well, you've got to practice.
Yeah, you do got to practice. He's got the skills under control. Speaking of some players having skills under control, you do have one of the Nuts moving up. And joining the Tigers.
Yeah, Jake Marisnick just was called up to the Detroit Tigers. He was a Lugnut 2010-2011. I loved calling him Clark Kent when he was in Lansing because if you saw him, he's 6'4", dark hair, and really unassuming, humble guy. And then he'd go out there onto the field and he'd make Superman catches. And he was wonderful for us. Drove us in 2011 all the way to the Midwest League Championship Series. So I'm so glad to see him getting this chance with the Tigers.
Awesome. Anything else with the Tigers to bring in some of that excitement with him?
I mean, Matthew Boyd is there. So you've got Boyd on the mound as a former Lugnut from 2013. You've got Jake Marisnick in the outfield, and it's just that short drive. It's fun that whenever we've got the opportunity, we can make that road on over to Detroit, see some Tigers games whenever the Lugnuts are not at home, which, in fact, they won't be this coming week. The Lugnuts will be going to South Bend to take on the Cubs, the defending Midwest League champions. And I'll have you know, the last time that the Lugnuts took on the South Bend Cubs, the last game, September 4th last year, no-hitter.
All right.
Lugnuts threw their 3rd no-hitter in franchise history against South Bend. And I've heard from my Cubs fans, they say, that's what got us kick-started on our way to the championship. So I'm so glad to go back and no-hit them a couple more times.
There you go. Show them up down in Indiana. All right, let's hear a little bit more about what's to expect for the South Bend Cubs. And we'll get to something in a little bit with them as well.
I think just first for the Lugnuts, it'd be great to see them either split a series or win a series. They've dropped 2 series in a row. They went down to Fort Wayne, Indiana, lost 4 of 6, and then they also obviously just lost to the Kernels. So the bats are starting to heat up. We just saw them hit double-digit home runs for the first time in a series this last week. Can that power surge continue? on the road outside of a hitter-friendly park in Jackson Field.
And let's stay on that, because how about Johnny Butler's power surge?
Yeah, 3 home runs this week. You could say the same thing about Eusebio Angeles, 2 guys that hadn't hit a ton of home runs. We knew that there was pop, and both guys had big weeks at home.
Yeah, this is fun to watch the Lugnuts start to flex their muscles. I don't want too much attention to be pulled away from the starting pitching that the Lugnuts got. Jack Perkins, quality start. Jacob Waters is looking dominant. Christian Fernandez is continuing to put in good effort after good effort.
And I think another hitter as well, Daniel Susek, has been the most consistent guy for the Lugnuts. Had a great month of May. Average is now up towards 300, and he's swinging it really well.
It should be noted, so the Lugnuts are going to South Bend to play the Cubs. Meanwhile, off the field, Ballpark Digest, the battle of the ballparks, it's going to be Jackson Field against Four Winds Field. But let's not talk about that now.
We will highlight some more of that coming up, though. So anything else you'd like to mention in terms of the Lansing Lugnuts and anything to get excited for?
I think for the Lugnuts right now, with us on the road, we've got the big homestand coming up in 2 weeks, but we'll leave that a little bit down the road for on deck.
And, you know, playing at home versus on the road, how are they looking in terms of that kind of record-wise?
You know, the fun thing about the Lugnuts at home is that's where we've seen the bats. And on the road, that's where we've seen the really strong pitching performances, I would say, by and large.
Yeah, I mean, the records, honestly, are pretty much the same. There are a couple games under 500 both ways, at home and on the road. But to Jesse's point, most of the home runs, when you look at Johnny Butler, when you look at Eusebio Angeles, all of their home runs are coming at home. So for us, it's just seeing, now that the weather has started to warm up and the bats have seemingly started to heat up, are we going to see that go on the road as well? And we'll find out this week.
All right, I'm excited to hear more when we meet up again for Extra Innings next week, Mondays at noon. So make sure to tune in. Until then, Jesse, Adam, thank you so much for joining Extra Innings.
Thank you. We like to end with Go Nuts.
1, 2, 3, go Nuts!